Welcome. Thank you once again for joining us here in Worcester, Massachusetts to learn about safe technology, wireless risks, and solutions for how we can all live with technology in our world. I am so very grateful that WCCA TV hosts us for this and that you join us to continue learning along with us. Our guest today is Elizabeth Kelley, who is the Executive Director of the Electromagnetic Fields Medical Conference. And this conference is available online to healthcare practitioners for 24.5 continuing medical education credits. The conference does, however, expire next month. Those wishing to take the training from world-leading experts are encouraged to register before the 15th of June, 2023, and complete the online training at your own pace by July 1st. So with us today, I am so honored to introduce Elizabeth Kelley, who has been working on the wireless radiation issue for more than 20 years. So Libby, welcome, and thank you for taking time from your vacation to be with us today.
Hello, nice to be here.
Can you tell us a bit about how you came to know about wireless risks and the work that you've been doing in the last couple of decades, as well as what your projects are today?
Well, I'll make it short because I've been working on this issue for now 27 years. Back in 1996, I found out that we were living in Northern California in the San Francisco Bay Area, that our church, where our young 3-year-old son was going to preschool, had just signed a contract to install a wireless communications facility on the steeple. And they were very glad about the revenue coming in and so forth. And I said, now, wait a minute, my son's going to preschool here. I'd like to know more about this. And so we convened a meeting. The pastor was involved, and we invited in the industry, and they brought Dr. Jerome Bushberg from the University of Davis Medical School to tell us, explain that every questions. And after the meeting, the pastor said, well, he said, my job is to get the word of God out, not to radiate my neighbors. And so he breached the contract. And that whole experience told me a whole lot. And that's what has kept me going ever since. Because what I learned is that just a few months earlier, the Federal Telecommunications Act had passed, and in there was a prohibition against states and localities to take into account the adverse health effects, environmental effects, the word is actually, but health effects of radio frequency radiation when considering issuing a permit to install one of these facilities, just so long as the exposure condition was in compliance with the FCC's radio frequency human exposure guidelines. And my first thought was, wait a minute, this is a bill to advance technology that's keeping me from talking about my health concerns at a permit hearing. Something's up here. Something's wrong. What's going on? And that's what kept me going, because I felt that our health, our right to speak out about our health, and the responsibilities of states to look after public health, that's their duty, was being preempted. And so that's what's kept me going all this time since. So fast forward, I'm going to stop at this point if you have a question, though.
Well, Libby, I understand that you and Susan Malloy and others had worked with our government at the federal level not too many years after that, maybe 9 or 10 years after that. And I also understand that you have a background in public health. Can you tell us a little bit about your background there and the contributions that you've made at the federal level?
Well, I think it's because of my background in public health and public policy, having worked for 20 years in Washington, D.C. for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, with many years before that working in health and safety, health and welfare programs in California. I was primed to see this, that there may be, if there's a problem, I was alert to the possibilities. And that's what drove me to jump right into this. I made a commitment to do so. And I got to know Susan Malloy, who was a disability advocate living in California at the time. And we both served on a health advisory committee to Marin County Board of Supervisors. And she and I got together, and we were both invited to be on this panel put together by the National Institute on Building Sciences, who received an award from the U.S. Access board composed of representatives from at least 12 federal agencies. Their role is to look after disability access and accommodation according to the disability, what is it called? The Americans for Disability Act, as well as the Rehabilitation Services Act and other. I was asked to join this committee to review electrical hypersensitivity, I should say electromagnetic hypersensitivity and chemical sensitivity, and come up with recommendations. So what we did is compiled a report that included what we knew about these conditions, how people's health is affected when they have access problems, and what needs to be done to create safer environments. We called it passages with signage and spaces. Environmental sensitivities so they could access health care, which is their right. And so we helped put that report together, and it followed on previous statements made by the U.S. Access Board that they recognized both chemical sensitivity and electromagnetic sensitivity, but they hadn't acted upon it. This gave them more reason to take action. However, the sad thing is they have not yet taken action. A year ago, last May, Susan Malloy and I, along with Magda Havas and Sheena Simonton, and Sheena directs the Electrosensitive Society, we gave a presentation to the National Council on Disability at their invitation. And this body is appointed by the President and the Congress. And they had a very positive response and said that they wanted to look into this further. And it is included in the National Council on Disability's Health Equity Plan, that people who have these environmental conditions and sensitivities deserve equal access at parity with the general population to healthcare services. So we felt that we made progress there. You can see that tape, by the way, by going to electrosensitivesociety.com.
Excellent, Libby. And for those who go out to our website too, on our resources page at Massachusetts for Safe Technology, we have a link to information on electrosensitivity, and we include those resources from Libby and Sheena and Dr. Havas as well. So that's terrific. We're so very grateful. When I first fell down the rabbit hole on this issue, I thought, surely somebody's got to have our backs on this as I'm reading all this science showing harm. And then I learned, as you learned, that the telecom industry has very deep pockets and heavy influence in Washington, D.C. So things don't happen quickly there. And one of the other big gaps that I noticed is that there were so many people, even around me, who were getting sick and didn't know to connect their symptoms to these microwave radiation electromagnetic fields that are being pulsated around us from so many different directions today. And because you would become sick, you would go to your doctor would run the tests they know to run, and they would come up empty. And then you would start paying thousands of dollars out of pocket to go see a specialist who ran the tests they knew to run, but then they would come up empty too. And you're still over there getting sicker and sicker, and nothing that they're treating you with is helping. So I am so very grateful, first to Dr. Lynn Patrick, who built the first EMF medical conference in 2019 in honor of Dr. Bill Ray, who was one of the pioneers on electromagnetic and other environmental illnesses. And then that conference came and went, and then Libby, you took the reins to form another conference for 2021, and we know these conferences take a year or two to pull together. So can you tell us how you got involved with creating this current medical conference that we have?
Well, I want to go back to 2015 when we launched the International EMF Scientist Appeal, which I've been managing ever since. And it's now signed by over 250 EMF scientists who have all published in professional journals, papers showing biological and health effects from exposure to radio frequency radiation, and electricity, extremely low frequency radiation. So we're talking here about the entire non-ionizing part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And those scientists represent now 45 nations, and we're still adding names to it. So we have this wonderful connectivity with scientists who are concerned about this issue, who published on this issue, and realize they're not being heard. In fact, they're being ignored and defunded and unable to get grants. So they are sticking together as much as we can. And we called for a moratorium on 5G deployment in 2017 once that generation of technology was introduced. The advisors did on that. But then we realized that one of our many recommendations, and you can see the appeal at emfscientists.org, one of the recommendations was to educate doctors about the effects of EMF exposure on health. And so we decided, okay, we're going to follow up on what Lynn Patrick had done 2 years earlier, and we're going to organize the second EMF medical conference, which we did in 2021. And at that conference, we had experts in science, medicine, technology, and law and policy come together. There were about 30 of them, and our program was a 4-day program that lasted for 29 hours. We were going to have it online, but at that time, the COVID virus had just started, and we took precautionary measures not to meet in person. We didn't even want to try it. So we just went online, which was a total new learning experience for so many of us at that time. And it went very well. It was attended by over 800 people, representing over 30 nations. And many of these people, I noticed, were up during the middle of the night to catch part of the program. And we had many side conversations and booths. So we had a lot of 20 co-sponsors. So there was a lot of networking going on as well among the people. And it ended who are concerned about this issue all over the world, which has had a lot of payoff over time. And we hope that another conference like that happens again sometime. But we decided to do this conference because we recognize that medical schools do not include anything about electromagnetic fields in their training program for physicians. And so these doctors, and I'll include other health practitioners there, and half of our conference was attended by health practitioners. They don't know how to recognize, diagnose, or treat people who have environmental sensitivities. And here we're talking about electromagnetic sensitivities, but often these people have multiple sensitivities. And so just focusing on the EMF exposure and sensitivity reaction alone, we realized that this kind of training was very important. And so we had in our program several physicians, including Dr. Elizabeth Seymour, who now runs the Environmental Health Center in Dallas, Texas, which is the clinic that Dr. William Ray founded over 5 decades ago. And she's quoted on our homepage and our website, which is still up, by the way, emfconference2021.com. She says, EMF exposure is growing at a rapid pace, and the list of symptoms are vast. Physicians must have a general understanding of how to evaluate and manage an EMF patient's case. It is paramount that physicians receive the education and recommend treatment guidelines and how to best care for these complex patients. So while our goal was to train doctors, we had a lot of participation for people who were not doctors, including people that were ill, that needed to know how to help themselves. And for that reason, we had speakers that talked about EMF assessment and mitigation, so they could learn how to practice precaution voluntarily or ensure that the areas where they spend a lot of time are low EMF or completely clean, which is a real achievement these days with the proliferation of signal. But our goal was to provide the tools these doctors would need so they could, in this course, so they could take action. And that is to learn about the scientific evidence, which is extensive and includes not only evidence on EHS, which affects about 30% of the US population, and 4% of the population is severely affected to the point they are disabled and unable to participate in normal life. So that's a critical thing to understand. There's some people that won't even be able to get to a doctor and can't go online to do a telecommute or telemedicine visit. They need help too. Grow your practice and become a local expert, which I have seen many doctors do around the world. We refer to them when we hear about them. Thirdly, learn when to suspect and how to diagnose EMF-associated illness. What are the common symptoms? Headache, sleep problems, poor concentration, depression, and more. And then finally, recognize and avoid the clinical pitfalls that doctor and other health professionals fall into when they're confronted with a person that has a mystery illness. They're not very helpful. Sometimes they're kind of crabby and they need a lot of help and they're asking for help. So what do you do with a person like this? This is not necessarily a mental problem here in terms of mental health problem. It's a physiological problem that needs to be addressed. And recognizing that there is a difference. It may have mental health components, but this is a physiological problem that needs to be cared for.
Oh, Libby, thank you so much for that overview of the conference. Right now, we're going to show the trailer for the EMF Medical Conference 2021. It's called 2021 because that was the year it was initially launched. It's been reaccredited, and it is still, the material is so incredibly relevant today as it was 2 years ago. Libby not only got this certified for 24.5 continuing medical education credits for doctors, but she went through a second pathway to get the CE, or continuing education credits, for nurses as well. And what I learned from my local firefighters is that they also need medical training, and they oftentimes don't have budget to go to conferences. So when I spoke to one of the firefighters in my town, he was delighted to know that he could take this conference online on his own time from the firehouse when there were no emergencies in his community. So if you go out to the Massachusetts for Safe Technology website and you go out to our resources page, we have a letter there that you can print out and give to your healthcare practitioners. And there's also a policy statement from the International Association of Firefighters, where they long ago in 2004 said, some of our guys were getting sick from these cell towers near the fire station, so we don't want cell towers near us until it can be proven safe. The industry, of course, has figured out ways to put those installations in anyway, but there's two really good resources you can take to your fire stations as well as to your own healthcare practitioners. So let's go ahead and take a look at the EMF Medical Conference 2021 trailer.
Whenever there's scientific controversy, it tells me that scientists haven't figured things out, and it means we can learn something.
Case after case after case of malignant glioblastoma, lymphoma, metastatic carcinoma.
There's also pretty compelling evidence that there's a link between brain cancer and mobile phone usage. So much so that thankfully I wasn't a loose gun anymore.
So it makes no sense to argue that you can use a radiofrequency radiation to put chemotherapy into the brain and then say that, but by the way, there's no negative effects.
It would be very nice to do studies before it is installed and then study patients again after they have been exposed to cell phone towers.
And why do we allow 100 times more radiation exposure to our citizens and our children than other countries do?
When you look at the data and you look what's happening with infertility, cancer, DNA damage, they're just seeing these young people that we're seeing already.
We talk about the longer you can delay portable screens for your child, the better.
If you interview these patients, they'll tell you about cell phone use next to their head.
The problem is that physicians are not trained to ask these questions.
Now with COVID, we all have experienced some form of social isolation, but our EMF patients especially feel socially isolated.
EMFs act on bacteria and their hosts in a stressful manner.
EMF source removal or avoidance are the best way for creating a low EMF environment. If that does not work, the most effective solution is to shield their home.
We need to listen to the scientists. We need to believe the scientists that are doing the EMR research.
Wireless radiation isn't benign. It's a blessing and it's also a curse.
If they're not aware of this environmental pollutant and the consequences of this environmental pollutant, they're going to misdiagnose their patients.
Dr. Ray said to me, this is your generation's tobacco. He told me this 10 years ago, and I think he's right.
One of the presenters at the EMF Medical Conference recommended a particular device that allows people to see and hear this invisible toxin. This is called the Safe and Sound Pro 2 Broadband Radio Frequency Meter. It's from a company called Safe Living Technologies. And after the conference, I happened to meet a doctor from Massachusetts who went, and she said that she takes this and she can do everything in her training to help her patients get well, but if they continue to be exposed to microwave radiation, our biological cells only have so much energy, and if we're pulsing them with radiation and our cells have to do repair on that, they're never going to get over the hump to get to safe living again or homeostasis. So she bought this meter. It's in the $400 range, and she loans it to her patients for $10 and gives them 2 hours and says, now go home, do the scavenger hunt in your living areas, in your car, in your schools, in your office, wherever you live and spend your time. Go home and write down what your radiation exposure levels are, and then come back and we will teach you how to remediate all that so that you can have all the technology that you need, but without radiating yourself. And again, as we've discussed in earlier episodes, this is not rocket science to fix with the devices under our control. Plug an Ethernet cable to the back of your router, run the cable to wherever you use the most of your technology, and then plug it into your devices, or if your devices don't have an Ethernet port anymore, there are adapters on the market that you can buy to plug into a cell phone or a tablet or any of your other technology. So it's not rocket science to fix. There are little devices called Ethernet switches that allow you to plug in a whole bunch of different cables to all your different devices. So we know how to fix this. And then at the community level, it's really important to start working on how to talk to your town about this, open the conversation, and then look at your zoning code to make sure that your community is as safe as it can be within the current law, so that they won't put cell towers in at close range to our homes, our schools, our places of worship, and our senior facilities and our playing fields. There are many towns all over the country who have already put rock solid zoning code in, even though the industry comes in and says, oh no, your hands are tied. We get to put our equipment in wherever we want. That's simply not true. The attorneys will tell us that you may have one finger tied, but Congress left you with 9 other fingers for you to exercise your local powers of control. So we know how to fix this at every turn, and we are just so very grateful that we have this EMF medical conference available, but it's going away, and we don't know of another one that's being planned in the near future. So we really encourage you to take this video, take the resources that we'll send out with our communique, the letter that you can bring to your doctors, to your nurses, to your dentists, to your therapists, to your physical therapist, anybody who helps you to stay well. They very likely don't know that this issue even exists or that there's professional training to be had. But they have to register by June 15th and complete the training on their own time by July 1st in order to earn those 24.5 continuing medical education credits. Now, Libby, this conference comes to us in 2 parts. Can you describe for us part 1 and part 2 and the cost associated to enroll?
Thank you. That's exactly what I was hoping you would ask me to say, because this is the opportunity now for people that don't know much about EMF. The first course is called Basics, EMF Basics. It's the fundamentals about electromagnetic fields and how they affect biology and health, what the science says. What are the applications we should be concerned about? And how can we modify our environment to protect our health and that of our children? unfortunately, our scope doesn't include nature, although it really should, and there are scientific studies on this. But right now, we're talking about protecting health from the exposure conditions that are being regulated by the Federal Communications Commission that are harmful, and we are challenging those guidelines in court and with a group that I'm organized with now, the International Commission on the Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields. So back to the course 1 for 4 units, which is 4 hours. You pay $11 and you will have 4 hours with Dr. Magda Havas, who's a former lecturer at Trent University professor and has taught that course for 25 years. And she really puts it into perspective with lots of graphics. Secondly, $34 will buy you the second course, and that is a 20-hour course that gets you 20.5 CME credits. And that is a overview with presentations from the conference and some of the top experts in the world who have published extensively on this issue. And I won't have time to go through all of them, but if you go to our website, I don't think I need to say that anymore, but it's emfconference2021.com. You can find out more about our faculty and our program and all the sidebar webinars that are there. And that site will stay up for a while because it is a resource, even though we're not offering the courses after July 1.
Okay. All right, Libby, thank you so very much. We are just so honored that you joined us today and so humbled by the work that you and your colleagues continue to do, even after decades of hitting obstacle after obstacle. When they zig, we zag, and we just keep going because this is our world that's getting radiated heavily today. And there's so many solutions at our fingertips, and this EMF Medical Conference is one of the best out there. So thank you so much for joining us from your vacation and for all that you and your colleagues are doing, and we look forward to looping in with you again soon. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And you are an inspiration to all of us. Don't forget that. Thank you.
I'm in kindergarten. You guys are the experts, but I'll tell you, I learned so much at that medical conference. I literally went through 3 pens taking copious notes. And I also wanted to mention in closing that even though the conference is going away, a number of Libby's colleagues have published the first medical school textbook. So even though the conference is ending, we have an incredible resource called The Electromagnetic Fields of Wireless Communications, Biological and Health Effects. And great thanks to Dr. Panagopoulos out of Greece for coordinating this, and to all of his colleagues who contributed chapters. And it is hugely resourced, so you will find the studies here. So thank you very much for joining us, everybody, and we look forward to our next talk on safe tech. Have a great day.